Extraterrestrial life may or may not exist, but to millions of people, spacecraft built by aliens definitely do. There have been reported sightings of unidentified flying objects for centuries around the world, but on a few nights in October of 1973, Appalachia appeared to be awash in them. And today we tell that story. Hello, folks. I'm Steve Gilley, along with Rod Mullins, and this is Stories, a History of Appalachia.
You know, Steve, it seems to be that we, as human beings, some of us at least, have this obsession about UFOs.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
you know, I'm just saying this now. I'm going to ask you a question. Have you ever seen a UFO before?
No, I have not. I'm assuming you probably have.
Yes, I have. I've seen a UFO before. I've never really talked about it too much, not even to my wife of almost 37 years, but I did see one at one time. And you know, these things have been, gosh, going back even to the beginning. You know, what was it? I think in the Bible they even said Ezekiel saw the wheel. That's what one reference is. And then you had during World War II, you had gremlins, and then you had Foo Fighters
Yeah.
while World War II was going on. So it seems to be that, you know, there's a lot of, you know, obsession, interest in UFOs. And I tell you, I didn't know about this story until we were getting it ready to record.
Well, I have read a book about this. I forget who the author is, but I do remember reading a book about this and looked a little into it, got into the newspapers and dug down deep. And yeah, by golly, there was like a wave of UFOs over just a 2 or 3 day period back in October of 1973. I do not remember any of this. Yeah, I lived in Big Stone Gap at the time, and I just don't remember anybody talking about seeing UFOs, but apparently a lot of people did.
Yeah, well, you know, I think during this time, I think I had heard of the story about the two fishermen down in Appalachia, Florida, that had supposedly been kidnapped by a UFO. But now, other than that, I hadn't heard any stories about Appalachia, so to speak, having UFOs. Really, not until what, the late 80s? And then the UFO rash of sightings appeared up 81 and down I-77 around Withville. So this is a story, though, that takes place in the neighborhood of about 10, 15 years earlier. But still, it's very interesting.
It is indeed. And for whatever reason, the middle of October of 1973 saw that wave of UFO sightings in Appalachia and, to be honest, beyond. Many of those reports came from the East Tennessee area, which is where we're going to start. The night of October 17th started out like any other until those reports started coming in. Now, Cripple Creek is a small community near Watauga in Carter County. A woman contacted authorities on the night of the 17th to report a very unusual thing that had happened to her family. Apparently, a UFO had landed on a nearby hill. According to folks in Cripple Creek who'd seen it, the thing was the color of copper, saucer-shaped, and the size of a house. And it deposited a man, or something like a man, who came to the woman's house and, according to her, tried to kidnap her young children. She was so convincing, Rod, that she got the Carter County Civil Defense Director himself to arrive the next morning to conduct a thorough search of the area, but he reported finding nothing and said he saw no evidence of anything having been at the woman's house or on that nearby hill.
Well, in Kingsport that same night, a man who lived on Virginia Avenue in the city called the Kingsport police to report that he had seen a UFO and wanted an officer to be sent to his house. One was dispatched to the residence, but he later reported that the object was only a bright star and not a UFO. Well, about the same time, a woman on Island Road in Blountville called the Sullivan County Sheriff's Department to complain about a UFO that was, well, keeping her up. She and her husband had seen the object, which he described as being real big and orange. The couple's dogs were also stirred up by this object as they became excited and started barking furiously when the UFO appeared. They didn't stop in the barking, though, until the next morning.
In fact, Rod, the woman herself went outside into the cool night air with a set of binoculars, determined to get a better look at whatever it was that was hovering near their house. Now, she was only dressed in her pajamas, though, so she was very cold. Plus, she reported that she was scared to death and was shaking because of her fear and the cold, too. So she wasn't able to get a very good look at the object. She did, however, see it well enough to report that it was shaped in a long fashion, like a hot dog or something similar to that. Well, the two went on to bed, with the woman waking up at 3 a.m. She said she looked out at the UFO again since it was still there. She said that it had moved in the sky, though. She returned to bed, and when she and her husband awoke the next morning, the dogs had stopped barking and the UFO was gone. The mysterious objects, though, Rod, also appeared in the skies over Piney Flats.
Well, a woman there in Piney Flats reported not one but two UFOs, bright red and high in the sky in the direction toward Elizabethton. A Carter County deputy later reported that those lights were reflections from a dump fire. Then they were probably warning lights on top of the two TV antennas. Well, those explanations were rejected by the woman, who said that the lights stayed on for a few hours, then moved off toward Elizabethton as they faded out. Now, folks, we're not done yet.
No, we're not. The next morning, shortly after 7:30, people reported seeing an unidentified flying object hovering over Ketron High School in Bloomingdale in Kingsport. Now, these folks said that the object stayed in its position for about 10 minutes before it left, around 7:45. But not everyone who called the authorities that night was all that interested in the strange objects in the Appalachian skies. In fact, there was one man who was downright PO'd about the whole thing. This fella, who lived in Washington County, Tennessee, had been happily ensconced in his favorite chair in the living room, trying to watch the World Series on his TV. And he would have been happy but for that damn UFO outside the house. He called the Washington County Sheriff's Department to complain that his wife and daughters had spotted that UFO, and they were so excited about it they kept interrupting his sports show on the TV, which was upsetting him no end. He demanded the sheriff send out a deputy to, quote, run the thing off, end quote, so he could get back to his World Series viewing in peace. These sightings were on the heels of other UFOs being seen in Middle Tennessee the night before.
Wow. A man in Mount Juliet, Tennessee, reported to authorities that he had seen a circular object with flashing lights and a sound, well, kind of like a vacuum cleaner, as it passed over his house. As this UFO went by, he reported that his wife, who was on the phone at the time, was unable to talk to her friends because of the bad interference the object caused to the telephone line as it passed. And WKRM Radio in Columbia, Tennessee reported that their phone lines were swamped in the night of October 16th with reports of mysterious objects in the sky. All of these UFOs were reported to be headed north toward Nashville. Now, these strange things weren't only spotted in Tennessee that night, were they, Steve?
No, they weren't. Pilots on approach to the Raleigh County Airport in Beckley, West Virginia, reported to the tower that there was something else in the sky with them. A mysterious aircraft that would change color from red to green, then to white, and then back to red again, over and over. By the time they'd landed, the unidentified object had vanished. At about 2 in the morning of the 17th, someone called the Beckley City Police to report a UFO sitting in the middle of Crescent Road, although officers dispatched to the scene reported nothing there. And a woman reported a big light circle above the Raleigh General Hospital for about 20 minutes. She said it then moved to the Mabscott Grade School, but she stopped watching because her eyes were getting tired, straining to see what it was exactly. She did, though, describe what she saw as a big round light. When it dropped low, she said she saw wings and a tail coming from the edges of the light. It then disappeared.
Well, in Ohio, a UFO was reported to have landed on a farm and killed a woman's cow. Even state officials saw these unidentified objects. The governor of Ohio, John Gilligan, reported that he and his wife saw an amber-colored flying object when the two were driving in Michigan at night. Now, by the way, while this might have been the first time a sitting governor reported seeing a UFO, there was a future governor and president who saw one a few years earlier, say in 1969 in Georgia. Jimmy Carter was getting ready to give a speech at the local Lions Club meeting. Just before the meeting was to start, around 7:15 in the evening, one of the men with him called his attention to a strange object in the sky to the west. Mr. Carter later said that it was bright white and as bright as the moon. It moved toward the men, then it stopped behind some pine trees where it started to change color from white to blue and then to red and then back to white before disappearing. Now, there were a few scattered reports on that night, but nothing like the wave of UFO sightings that happened on October 16th and 17th, 1973.
And folks, that's the story of a wave of unidentified flying objects seen in the skies over Appalachia in the fall of 1973. Another bit of the history of this place we call home. Thanks for listening. You can subscribe to the Stories Podcast on your favorite podcast app. Until next we meet, y'all take care. So long, everybody.